was Manduha the Wise? Was she really the female Genghis Khan? She fought and gave birth on the battlefield, reunited a fractured Mongolia, and the Ming Dynasty were desperately building the wall to contain her. And the famous question, did she really marry her adopted son? Well, if you stick around, you'll find out in this video because I will be talking about her entire life. Also, I want to just mention that Genghis Khan's name is pronounced as Chinggis Khan in Mongolia. Hence, I'm going to be referring to him as Chinggis Khan from now on and all Khans as Hans from now on. Before we start Manduha's history, we need to go back in time. We all know that he was the founder of the Mongol Empire and it spanned between Europe and Asia. But to the Mongols, the best thing that he had done for them was end the bloodshed on the steppes. The Mongols had been a group of different tribes and people that consisted of Mongols, Turkic and Tatar tribes that Genghis Khan united to create Mongol Ulus, which became the country of Mongolia. And that ended the strife that was on the steppes. All of these different groups used to fight each other and he kind of ended that. Around that time, the Jin dynasty controlled northern China and they would often create wars between these groups of people to keep them at bay. And he basically ended that, right? And during Manduha's time, the Mongol Empire had fractured into 4 different sections and the Mongols had been kicked out of China at the time and it became Ming Dynasty. So Manduha was born into the Northern Yuan Dynasty, which consisted of Mongolia, a bit more north in Siberia, as well as what is considered Inner Mongolia today, which is part of China. And the Mongols that had ruled the Yuan dynasty were also fractured into 2 large sections, the western and eastern. So the western side were called the Oriats. They used to live in modern day Xinjiang and Western Mongolia. Xinjiang used to be called Hizgar in Mongolian, which means far out, and they used to live there. And the Eastern Mongolians were called the Northern Yuan Dynasty, and that is where Manduha was born into. The difference between the Northern Yuan and the Oriats was that the Northern Yuan believed that the heir of Genghis Khan, which was called the Golden Lineage, had the right to rule Mongolia and ascend the throne. While the Oriat Mongols did not agree with this, they thought anyone else could ascend and they wanted to keep their independence that way. Hence, Mongolia had also fractured into 2 main groups. There were 2 main warlords that were pretty significant. One of them was called Big Arslan, just like Aslan from Narnia, except he wasn't as kind. And Arslan in Mongolian means lion. And there was also Ismail. And they did not want a true golden lineage Khan to ascend the throne. They just wanted a puppet Khan. And the closest that they got was someone called Mandukhai Khan. And he was in his 60s without any heirs. After Mandukhai Khan ascended the throne, he was looking for a younger wife to possibly have an heir with, and that was Manduha. So in 1464, Manduha was 16 years at the time, daughter of Churusba Tumur, the Grand Council of the Ongud Mongols. She was a teenager entering this court of vipers. You can imagine the pressure that she was under to have an heir with a man in his 60s and to notice the dynamic that was happening, that her husband was actually a puppet for these powerful men like Big Arslan and Ismail. I recently watched a movie about Manduha the Wise. It was filmed in the 80s in Mongolia, and I would recommend the movie, but it is in Mongolian, so it doesn't really have a translation. And in the movie, Manduha was depicted as just a young girl entering the court, and she didn't really want to be there. She wanted to stay at home. So it was fictionalized, but you can kind of imagine how it must have felt to be 16 years old, leaving home and marrying a puppet hand. So we will skip a little bit. During this time, Ismail and Big Arslan convinced Mandul Khan to attack his own grandnephew, Bayeng Mukhjanin. Also, by the way, Bayeng means rich in Mongolian, and Munk means eternal. Ismail convinced Mandul Khan that his grandnephew was leading a coup to take over, and Mandul Khan fell for the lies, so he attacked Bayeng Mukhjanin. And try and keep this in mind because it will be important for later. And Bayeng was forced to flee, and Ismail's men found him and killed him. His son escaped during this. And around 1478, Mandul Khan died under mysterious circumstances, and his older wife also disappeared. During my investigation, I used to have this belief that maybe Manduha got rid of them because she was just like a powerhouse. But upon the research, it seems more like Esmel and Big Arslan had a bigger say in this. They wanted rid of him, probably because he was getting a bigger head after killing his grandnephew, right? Because Manduha was now the sole khatan, she could become the khatan, which means the queen of Mongolia. She could ascend the throne. Any man that married her would become the Khan of Mongolia as well. The best thing politically would have been probably to marry Ismail or Big Arslan or one of her old friends, Unbald. Unbald was also from the golden lineage through Chinggis Khan's other son Hassar, but to ascend the throne it had to be through his son Ugodo's line. But Manduha did not marry any of them. She in fact decided to chop up all of her hair, which was a big deal in Mongolian customs at the time. To have long hair meant that you were royal, that someone of her stature wouldn't have cut their hair lightly. And she said she wanted to reunite Mongolia and stop the fracture that was happening. She was afraid that the country would become non-existent if it went down the path that it was going down, with all of these warlords trying to control whatever they could. And Ismail was later rumoured that he was probably a spy for the Ming and he wanted all that power for himself. And Manduha sought out to actually find the son of Bayeng Mukhjanin, Batmunk, to ascend him to the throne. And so that is what she'd done. And obviously Big Arslan and Ismail officially became her enemies, and she managed to find Batmunk before them and she ascended him to the throne. One of the great things about Unbald was that he did want to be the Khan, but he was fiercely loyal to Manduha instead of becoming her enemy and saying, "Oh, why did you not marry me? You know, I am going to ascend the throne anyway." He stayed loyal to her and to the boy Han. And he was an incredible ally to Manduha for the rest of her life. But anyway, the fact that Manduha decided to save Batmunk and place him on the throne, she knew that he was one of the last descendants through Ogodo's lineage, and this was going to be a big deal in reuniting Mongolia again. So now that she had at least a united Eastern Mongolia, she decided to make war with the Oriats, the Western Mongols. The reason for that is they were constantly at war with each other during this time, and she wanted to take over them and reunite all of them. So she went to war, she picked up her sword and led the army. She didn't just sit back while her men and women, because a lot of women were part of the Mongol army as well. They used to be horse archers. So she fought and defeated the Oriats at the time. Although one of the saddest things was there was a lot of different rules that she set for the Oriats. They could not have a crest on their hat, on their helmet, that was bigger than 2 inches. And they were not allowed to call their orden an orden, which means basically a palace, a ger palace. They weren't allowed to refer to that, and they had to kneel in the presence of a Han. So it was basically a way to say, Oriats, you don't have your own Han. Like, you are under us now. One of the recounts in history is that they were not allowed to have any equipment like swords or knives, but historians say that it probably wasn't something that was permanent, and it was only during a small period of time. However, you can imagine that must have been really hard. They could not use knives. They had to eat meat with their own teeth and things. They couldn't cut it up. So we're going to jump a tiny bit more. When Batmunk, the boy Han, officially turned 19, and Mandukhai Khatun married him. So she became his wife, and they had children, you know. They had a huge age gap, yes, but I'm not too sure about what it was like to be his adopted mother, like what the dynamic was. Given that they were royals, he was probably raised by other people, so it wasn't as bad as it would have been if she was the sole person raising him. However, I am sure that there was some strange dynamics at the time. But they stayed married their whole life, and they did have a lot of children. However, the Oriats did attack the Eastern Mongolians again and raided them, so Manduha went to battle. But this time Manduha was heavily pregnant, and she went to war. Like, she put on her armor, took her sword, and led the army, not just as someone in the back. She was with her army, leading them, and she gave birth on the battlefield, which eventually led to her winning again. So again, the Oriats were under her. So it was crazy that she not only fought heavily pregnant, gave birth. Manduha was a real warrior queen. So by 1480, Manduha rethroned Batmunk as the Han of Mongolia. He became the dying. And around this time, the Ming Dynasty were freaking out. They wanted to contain her. They killed some of her envoys. They stopped border trade. They thought, oh my gosh, she's reunited them. They have become a threat to us. After they killed her envoy, Manduha then attacked the Ming. She took back the Ordis Plateau, which is actually where the Ming were building the Great Wall, and that was part of Mongolia at the time. So she retook that area, rethroned Dayan Han at the 8 White Yurts, and that is when the Ming Dynasty built the entirety of the Great Wall. Mandukhai Khatun and Dayan Han did reunite Mongolia, and some sources say Manduha died in 1510 under mysterious circumstances, but other sources say that she did die of natural causes. I forgot to mention, but Ismail and Big Arslan had a huge fight at some point, and it seems like Ismail probably won because Big Arslan wasn't really mentioned anymore after certain recounts. Manduha wasn't just a warrior queen, she also had the capabilities to lead a nation as a big political figure. She knew how to have people follow her. Between Dayan Han and Manduha, they had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and all of the Hans that came after her were through her bloodline. So a lot of Mongolians say that she didn't just save Batmunk, an orphaned boy, but she also saved the soul of Mongolia, and she is one of the reasons that Mongolia still exists today. Obviously, there were other things that happened, but she was a really important khatan and figure. If you made it this far, thank you very much. If you enjoyed listening to her story, then please subscribe and comment what you thought. If you happen to also like fantasy books and Mongolian history, then you might be interested in reading my book. It is set in a fantasy Mongol Empire-esque world. So if you're interested in that, please follow for more. And thank you.